Now, Jacob Davies is a 19-year-old poet and writer who's with us here just now. How are you doing today?
I'm deliriously happy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm probably about the same, I think. So, your new poetry collection coming out on the 3rd of June is called Every Night is November. Why is it called Every Night is November?
Good question. I think it's what it says it is. Really, it's
Hmm,
dark, moody, smoggy. I suppose you can't be overly scientific about it.
yeah.
It's emotion. It's real. It's not premeditated, pre-calculated, or
Hmm,
choreographed or anything like that. It's as raw as pain and as raw as joy, and all of
yeah.
those things. And that's what my book is, and
Yeah.
that's what I am, unfortunately, for all involved.
Yeah. Is it quite ironic that it's being released in June, but being called Every Night is November?
Yes, there's a lot of poems in there as well about sort of summer themes,
Hmm.
in quite a backwards and dark sense, I suppose. So you've got "I'm almost certain someone will come," about
Yeah.
someone who's died and passed on. So yeah, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose it is.
Yeah. So, how would you describe the style of the poems, really, in terms of structure and things?
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it's quite dark,
Hmm.
and they're often quite dark in that sense. But it has to be real. That's the
Yeah.
priority. It has to be true to me, otherwise it's absolutely pointless,
Hmm.
and completely drab and just another book,
Yeah.
amongst the patter and the spiel. I think it's important people have an escape,
Hmm.
which is why I write to escape, because I think life has the potential to be insufferably cruel at times,
Hmm.
um, and I think that's
Yeah.
often reflected in my work.
Yeah. Especially during these last couple years, a lot of people have found it tough. Has that inspired the collection in any way?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think there's a lot of
Hmm.
themes of isolation and loneliness and
Yeah.
separation in that. And I think now more than ever, those themes might be more easy to identify with as a reader.
Hmm.
Um, so you never know, that could work for in a positive sense in some ways.
Yeah. And how long did the poetry collection actually take you to write?
So it's been a couple of years now. I
Hmm.
started straight after I published my last one. This is my second now.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't know if that was a good idea or not in hindsight, really.
Yeah.
But it was just straight away, and clearly I still had some things left over to say, and
Hmm.
this is what this is.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting point about it being a good idea or not, because do you think a break would have helped, or is it maybe better to stay in the swing of writing?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think
Hmm.
there is, despite there being such a short period of time between the two, I think there's a remarkable difference in almost outlook and style in the
Yeah.
two. The first one, The Things I've Never Seen, was just an outcry, and sometimes when I read it back, because it was written over such a short amount of time, I
Hmm.
can almost see myself wanting to scream in the words. Whereas
Yeah.
Every Night is November has taken a little bit longer to put together, and it's
Hmm.
maybe a little bit more like I've sat back and picked my targets in that sense.
Yeah. And in terms of COVID again, has that given you a little bit more time? Would it have still been in
Yes.
progress maybe if COVID hadn't have happened?
No, absolutely. I think
Hmm.
no, with the first book particularly, I don't think I'd have even put it together or done anything
Yeah.
like that without COVID. So I almost used that as not inspiration, but
Yeah.
extra time
Yeah.
and looking at yourself and thinking, well,
Hmm.
what can you achieve? Thankfully, I put the first book out, and hopefully this one goes just as well.
Yeah. And it's quite a big collection of poetry, isn't it? How do you
Yeah,
decide at what point it's finished? You've written enough poems and it's done.
yeah. It felt like the right time. It felt like
Hmm.
the collection was done, and I was coming to a point where I was writing new things. And it when I compared what those things were to what's in the book, it didn't feel like the same collection,
Yeah.
which I appreciate is a rubbish answer. But it's almost like a creative autobiography in a sense,
Yeah.
but it's presented in tidy couplets rather than reams and reams of sort of tedious anecdotes.
Yeah.
It is my life, it's my creative space and my outlet, and um, there's no one in my creative space that can say no, you can't, and
Hmm.
I quite like that that
Yeah.
controlling side of it.
Were there any poems maybe that you had written but you cut from it maybe because that would make it too long, or they just weren't as good as some of the others?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I think
Hmm.
I could, if I did a book of all the ones I cut, I think it might be twice as big as this new one. Yeah,
Yeah.
the way for me, with it being my outlet and my way of expressing myself, it's constant. It never stops. I don't think
Mm.
today at 3:30 I'm going to write something. It's just, yeah, constantly coming out. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, there's been plenty that have been put on the floor of the editing room almost.
Yeah. And I guess sometimes a poem might not make it in, but could you use parts of that poem to make a new poem in the future?
Yeah, I mean, on the rare occasion that sort of thing has been done. Yeah,
Mm.
like I said, you can't be too scientific about it, but there
Yeah.
is um, a sense of almost woodworking poems together and chopping bits up and throwing
Yeah.
it, which is something I like to avoid a little bit because I feel like it's got to flow and be
Mm.
one thing. But yeah, it's certainly something I've done on a couple of occasions.
Yeah. And where do you get your inspiration from for the poems that you write?
Yeah, again, another rubbish answer. It's everywhere, really. It's writing at times for me can be a little
Mm.
bit like looking at the dessert menu on the Titanic. It's in a glorious way. It's
Mm.
freedom in absolute captivity, which for me is gold dust. It's invaluable,
Yeah.
um, and there's nothing in life which compares in that sense. So there's inspiration from all around, a lot from music, other things that I've read, and almost just day to day things that I just pick up somewhere in the subconscious, and it spills out in some sidewards poetic way.
Yeah. And a poem about the dessert menu on the Titanic, would it just be about the desserts, or do you sort of use that as a link to make it about the Titanic overall?
Well, yeah, I suppose it's that there's a bit of gallows humor and
Mm.
fighting back in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you can look at the different angles of it and build up a bigger picture, which
Mm.
is something I quite like to do, and hopefully comes across in a humorous and ironic way at times.
Yeah. And how do you write as well? Is there a process for coming up with a poem or not?
No, well, it's never mechanical in the sense of I'm going to sit down and today I'll write a poem about this.
Yeah.
It's almost I have a little notebook which I carry around everywhere, which makes me sound like a bit of a sado. And I just scribble down little sort of couplets and one-liners and things like that. And eventually, when that topic, sometimes a day, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, comes together, it then becomes a thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Yeah. Do you find it easy to write though?
Yeah, I think I've always found it quite a natural process. I think it's the
Mm.
only way I can really um, look inwardly and speak to myself and understand myself.
Mm.
I suppose a lot of the time I think in that way, and that comes quite naturally. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, which is it a curse? Is it a blessing? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned, of course, about the dessert menu and the Titanic and things like that
Yeah,
for inspiration, but do you have to do research a lot, or is it mostly your own experience?
yeah. I try to avoid that really. I try to
Mm.
avoid almost looking outside of my own head, which sounds again quite egotistical. But
Yeah.
it has to be my thing. It can't be, um, anyone else's work in that sense. It's got to
Yeah.
be. It's got to come from me. It's got to flow from me. And I love that in the sense of no one says no, you can't. It's
Mm.
what I have to give. It's what I have to say, and that's my space.
Yeah. And in this poetry collection, there is a section A and a section
Mm.
B. What is the difference between the sections?
Yes. So in the simplest way, it's chronologically. So the
Mm.
first section was written before the second section. They're almost two different books in a sense, really, but
Mm.
with similar threads and things like that. I think for those that read it, they'll find it's a little bit darker in the second section,
Mm.
and there's that um, gradual thread. I
Yeah.
don't want to go on about too much, but there's almost like a descent to insanity through section
Mm.
A and section B.
Yeah.
Um, and also I just quite like the idea as someone who likes vinyl records and things like that, of having a
Yeah.
section A and section B, and just it feels quite separate and quite natural to have that division.
Yeah. Is it a gradual change from sort of lighter to dark, or does it change immediately when you get to section B?
Yeah, I mean, I don't suppose any of it's particularly light,
Yeah.
but there is a noticeable difference. It feels sharper, I would say. I think in section A, where sometimes it could feel quite silky to read it, if that makes sense. It's a
Yeah.
little bit like lying on a bed of nails in the second half. It's abrupt and it's quite an intense read, and I mean, I can't have it any other way, really. That's the
Yeah.
way it's been.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're a fan of vinyl. You like Morrissey, don't you?
Absolutely, yes. I think he's so different,
Mm.
which is magical. I think Morrissey fans feel spoken to, accepted, and understood, and all of those things, which for us Morrissey fans is quite rare.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes maybe this is an unfair assumption, but a lot of his lyrics are miserable and dark. Is that maybe partly where you have got your inspiration from?
Well, I wouldn't say miserable to start off with, but we can
Mm.
we can leave that there. Yeah, there's a lot of inspiration from music. I think I'm not sure if I would have had the courage to write and to share the things that I've written if it
Mm.
wasn't for I say people like Morrissey. How many people like Morrissey are there? But
Yeah.
and artists like Bell and Sebastian and Mark
Mm.
Morris and people like that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot of inspiration comes from that, and it
Mm.
is a really really important thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is there any
Okay.
chance you'd be able to read us one of your poems just now?
Yeah, go on then. Let me. I'm going to struggle off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
give me just 1 second. Um, uh, so you have put me on the spot here.
Yes.
I'm blaming you thoroughly for this awkward pause. Right. So this is a sonnet for a Wednesday afternoon, which I've picked a short one for you,
Yeah.
which I've just gone on my social medias this afternoon. It's
Mm.
part of a thing. I'm putting out a poem from it each week to sort of build it up. So as you lay awake all night with your fingers crossed, waiting for any excuse to abort the mind's sickening solitude relay, please remember nothing good is lost. It's just a little further away. When the day comes where this loneliness is buried in sand and they all want your autograph, keep your hands by your side and try not to laugh. There is only sunshine in your path, no matter which way the river sways. Embrace the waves of contentment in the aftermath, or live however you must underneath changing rays. Just don't align your pain with mine by feeling left behind.
Hey. Is that part of this collection, or is that a standalone thing?
It is, yes. So that's
Mm.
at the end of section A,
Ah,
which sort of almost feeds into the change in section B.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you've actually recorded some of the poems as songs. Are they spoken, like with a bit of music, or do you actually sing them?
Yes, so they are spoken. They are very
Mm.
much spoken word poems.
Yeah.
There's 6 of them ready to go out. The first one came out at the end of last month,
Mm.
which was "Don't Mess with Juliet," which I've had a lot of nice feedback about, which has been nice.
Yeah.
So there's a couple coming. I'm almost certain some will come. Henry's Hands, To Those Who Departed This Journey, Postcards, and Have You Yet Met Jenny?
Ooh.
Quite pleased I remembered those. So they're coming out over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's exciting. What made you want to release them as audio versions?
I think you get an extra element from listening to it,
Mm.
despite what you've just heard me stumble out there. I think you get an extra element with the music as well, and
Yeah.
in many ways, with music, you can feel closer to the writer or the
Mm.
singer or the artist or the poet or whatever. So that's really what I get from that. In ones like "Don't Mess," "Have You Yet Met Jenny?"
Mm.
You hear gunshots and sort of a loud party music in the start, which comes in way before you even hear the spoken word. So
Yeah.
I think you just get another angle out of it, and it's something I've really enjoyed messing around with and just putting my words to music because it's the first time I've done something like that.
Yeah, and maybe some people don't really like reading, so it's a
Mm.
good way. It's just like an audiobook, isn't it, really? But
Yeah,
with
yeah,
music, which makes it even more exciting.
absolutely. And in this dystopian age of social media and things like
Yeah.
that, YouTube it's at the grasp of your hand, isn't it? So
Mm,
um, that was another reason as well. It's that, how can I get this out there to as many people as possible? And
yeah.
um, with YouTube and recorded poetry, it can be a little bit more easy to digest as well,
Mm.
which again I've enjoyed doing.
Yeah, a lot of people might find it and go, "Oh, I didn't realize I liked poetry," and there you go.
Well, I don't know if I like poetry, so
Yeah, but that's the thing. Do you read other people's poems for inspiration or just for fun?
no, absolutely, yeah. There's
Mm.
both of those things, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the poetry of Anne Sexton,
Yeah.
Christina Rossetti, Oscar Wilde,
Mm.
people like that are just it's invaluable to
Mm.
sit and read something that you connect with, even if it was written 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'm a huge poetry fan and take a lot of inspiration from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we go then. How did you actually get started in writing poetry?
Yeah, I can't remember almost, people say the first thing you've written or anything like
Mm.
that. I've been writing since I was around 11, and it
Mm.
was almost by accident. I just scribbled things down that I thought, and it turned into whatever. But I didn't show anyone anything I'd written until I was about 15,
Mm.
um, when a competition at my college came up. So I went in for that, and it got quite well received. So I thought, why not? So I spent a couple of months sort of scraping together things I'd written for the things they've never seen, which is why I suppose that collection is an outcry. And at
Yeah.
times, I'll admit it's quite clumsily put together, but
Mm.
it is what it is for that reason. It's just, well, here I am almost. So yeah, so I started quite. I mean, I can't remember not writing. If I'm honest with you, it's
Mm.
always been my outlet and my way of getting out all those feelings. So yeah, so it's been quite a while.
Yeah. And why did you not show anyone your poetry for the first few years? Were you just not proud of it,
Yeah.
or was it just not, a big thing in your life?
It was always huge, but it was just
Mm.
absolute fear. If I'm honest with you, it
Yeah.
was, how dare anyone take that step into my mind and
Yeah.
see what's going on in there? It was always something to be pushed under the carpet, if you know what I mean,
Mm.
and kept to one side. Um, but I'm hugely glad that I did show people
Yeah.
my work, because it's something now I'm immensely proud of,
Mm.
and it means I can write a collection like Every Night is November,
Yeah.
and I can celebrate it in that way, because
Mm.
some of the pages are real days of my life and real things, and
Yeah.
again I'm immensely proud of it, and it means a lot to me.
Mm. And I guess sometimes you don't have to fear what people might think of you, because just because you've written something down, people don't necessarily think that that's what you actually think.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah, and there's a lot of separation to be found with speaker and poet.
Mm.
There are two different things there: the writer and what they are writing about. So a
Yeah.
couple of my poems from the new book are actually in quotation marks, so they're said
Oh.
by characters who aren't me, and
Mm.
um, I mean, I'm sure people who are close to me would see some resemblances there, but there is a differentiation there at
Mm.
times, and almost a way you can put something out there without feeling too exposed and too vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's what I have to give and what I have to say, and that's something
Yeah.
that's really important to me.
And I guess you have to have a boundary, don't you, between your life and what you write? Is there sometimes
Yeah.
stuff that maybe you can't really write about because it's just too
Yeah.
personal?
Yes, absolutely, and that's where my friends' metaphors come in and things like
Yeah.
that. Sometimes I do write things. I mean, there's a poem called, I'll name drop. There's a poem called Latvian Strangers in my new book,
Mm.
which, and also Smile by the Chapel ones, which come to mind, which I wrote originally and thought, oh God, can I say that? Can I sort of put that out there quite so
Mm.
frankly and openly? And sometimes with a little bit of messing around with it, and sometimes I just think, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So there is sometimes that danger of stepping over a boundary. But at the moment, I'm comfortable with it, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Now, what's coming up after this collection? Is there going to be a third one?
I absolutely no idea. I'm still writing constantly. I think the day I sent off this collection, this catastrophe to be printed, I wrote something else as well. So I've no idea. I think there'll be more of a break than there was last time. I felt like after the things I've never seen, because it wasn't 100% how I'd want it to be, I felt like there was a bit of a point to prove there and something I had to correct in Every Night Is November. But no matter what happens next, I'll never be able to stop writing, whether I like it or not. So we'll see. We'll see.
And you've got a copy there behind you, it looks like, which has been staring at me this whole time. I've only just noticed. Why did you decide to have a cat on it?
Yes, so again, I'll bring it closer. So I quite like this image. It's that contrast of the pink and the black and the light and the dark, which I think sums up the book really, really well. Cats as well, quite sort of, in this picture anyway, quite gloomy and quite isolated figures. And I also just quite love cats as well. So I've had a couple of people who have seen the front cover sort of come to me and talk about their cat. I mean, it's a way into conversation about the book. So I'm certainly not complaining.
Yeah. Well, where can we find Every Night Is November when it's released on the 3rd of June?
Yes, so it's available to pre-order now from my website, which is jdvswriter.com, which is just J Davies but without any other vowels, which I thought was quite clever. And then also I'm on Twitter at J Davies Writer. Great,
and it's out just in time for the Queen's Jubilee, which is somehow appropriate, but I don't know how.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of pro-monarchy poems in the book, so I'm sure you'll enjoy that.
Fancy. Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been great having you on.
Thanks a lot.